Okay, so Bogdan, you've got some Google Forms sessions coming up now. What can people look forward to?
So basically, for the next hour, we'll have 2 Google Form sessions, but we have quite a bit of flexibility in terms of how we would go through the sessions. So the first session is more like an intro session, giving you some ideas of how you can use forms in the classroom or, as you said, outside the classroom, because the forms can be very useful in very many scenarios. And we'll be looking also at how to create the self-graded quizzes. I'll be giving you some tips for maybe in some cases preventing students cheating and so on and so forth. And this will be the first part. So we'll get the basics under control, so to say. Once again, keep in mind, this is not a full-blown how-to tutorial. We would need more time for that to go in depth and explain every single thing. But I'll try to give some context and give some examples of where I would use one type of question or another, or which one works, and so on and so forth. In the second part, so in the second half an hour, we'll be looking at spicing things up in forms. I really like the Spice Girls image you've added to the slide. Now I have that Spice Up Your Forms song running in my head. So in that part, I would like to just share some more creative ways of using forms. In some cases, it's just using forms on their own. In some others, it's using forms coupled with some other tools like extensions and add-ons. You've already mentioned Equatio. I will look a bit into using images and Bitmoji, for example, in forms, and assigning differentiated tasks, or just allowing kids to create their own stories, and so on and so forth. So we'll go through some of those examples. Once again, keep in mind, it's more of a showcase of different ways of using forms, rather than going in depth and explaining every single step I went through in order to create them. Don't forget to hydrate yourself, and you've been here for a while now, so make sure you have some water nearby.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think like there are some sort of videos on the YouTube channel. So on the Apps Events has got some videos that can sort of pick up where you left off. And there's also the kind of getting started resources from Google for Education. And I'll put a link in the chat to those as well, which are a great place if you're inspired by some of the things that you see from Bogdan today. It might be that not necessarily you, but it might be something you want to share with your colleagues who are looking to add Google Forms to their repertoire of distance learning options as well. Because I find forms, I love a form, and it's everything from like a 2-question check-in that you might do just to check everyone's around, through to automating your whole school. And I think to do all of that in an hour would be obviously quite an undertaking. So if we can just whet the appetite and then provide people with the next place to go, hopefully that'll be really useful. So thank you for already sharing your screen. So what I'll do is I'll pass over to you, Bogdan.
Perfect.
Good people learn from one of our experts.
Perfect. Thank you, Ben. And also going back in time, actually, if you remember, Ben, I've joined one of your forum sessions years ago in Prague at a summit, and that's how I actually got in contact with the Google world, and that's how later I became a Google for Education trainer as well, and started working with Apps Events. So thank you once again for the inspiration, and I'm happy to be able to sort of pass it on, I hope. So as I said, this session will not be a how-to session, but still I want to show you some of the basics, especially given that I'm not sure who's in the audience. And I think it's useful for people to know at least how to use a form, how to create a basic form, and so on and so forth. So in the first part, even though it's called Google Forms 101, as I said, I'll go to some basics, but we will not spend too much time for explaining every single step. Now, having said that, let me quickly introduce myself. I am a Google for Education certified trainer. I was a science teacher. Yes, as Ben mentioned at the beginning, I am in love with my Chromebook, but I want to talk a bit about this photo, and not the photo itself so much, but the period in which it was taken, basically. So that was more or less around the time when I started using the Google Suite. And Google Forms is the tool that made me fall in love with the Google Suite. And I want to share this because I think it's important to have the right mindset when we use tools. And that applies also to Google Forms, because the most common uses for Google Forms that I see online are just creating forms for collecting data and forms for quizzes. And that's what most teachers stick to. But you can use them for so many different other purposes if you actually include them into a bigger process. You look at the end goal in mind. And that's why I started from this photo, because in this period I was struggling with my kids. Basically, long story short, the students were streamlined, so to say, based on the grades from the previous year. I will not go into the whole discussion about that and what happened. Bottom line is I chose the bottom group, who, by the way, were informed that they are in the bottom group. So they started already from the beginning of the school year with the idea that, hey, we were told that we are in the bottom group, so what's the point? We are stupid, there's no point in trying, and so on and so forth. So I was literally struggling, trying to get them on board, getting over this idea that they are not worth it, they cannot do it, they are stupid, they are in the bottom group, and so on and so forth. So I was trying to break this narrative in their heads. And of course, as a teacher, you can tell this to your kids as much as you want. You can repeat it, hey, that's not true, that's not the case, and you're not stupid, and so on and so forth. The kids will always say, yeah, but you're my teacher, that's what you're supposed to tell me. So that's where I was struggling. I was literally struggling. So that's when I started using Google Forms and self-graded quizzes. And I had a deal with them. I said, hey, let's do this. From now on, I will not tell you that you're not stupid. You don't have to listen to that. You don't have to listen to me telling you this. But let's do this. For the next 3 weeks or a month, after every single science lesson, I will give you a self-graded quiz or a self-graded form. You will fill it in on your way home or at home or whenever after the lesson. You'll get your grades and you decide for yourself if you are stupid or not. And lo and behold, after 3-4 days of doing this, they were like, hey, I understand what we are talking about and I know how to answer the questions. So maybe I'm not stupid. Maybe he's not just trying to convince me I'm not stupid. Maybe I'm not. So that's only when we actually managed to move forward, and I actually could start working with them like I would normally do. And I'm just so grateful for Google Forms showing up in my life, so to say, in that period, because I am aware of the fact that what made it work was the instant feedback. Kids could see the results immediately. And also the fact that it was so easy to use. They could do it on a phone or on their computer at home or wherever. So this is basically just the starting point. And as I said, that's how I started. That's why I wanted to share this this small story, the short story, and also remind you of the fact that this is not the case only for forms, but any other tool out there. Make sure that you start using the tool with the right mindset, especially nowadays when we go to this crisis situation and we are bombarded with free tools left and right. Try to focus on the end learning goal and then choose the tools that are actually suitable for that. So there are different ways of using it. So of course you can collect data. You can use it for surveys, for RSVPs, for evaluation feedback forms, data entry, quizzes, and so on and so forth. Like Darren mentioned, you could use it for the GCSE option process. It simplifies that a lot. Support staff can use them for sign-up forms or, let's say, uniforms, sizes, and whatnot, and field trips, and so on and so forth. So literally, you can use them for everything and anything. And just to show you how forms work, just in case there's somebody in the audience that hasn't used the Google form so far, if you can just follow this link or type it in the new browser tab, bit.ly/AETS form. So that stands for Apps Events Teacher Summit form. They are case sensitive, and actually what I'll do is I will also copy the link and I will paste it in the actual YouTube chat. So if that makes it easier, oh, thank you. I see that it's already posted. So as I said, this is just a simple example of a form, and if some of you can jump in and fill it in, that would be great. But what I want to show you is, while people are doing this, it's basically what are the different components for a Google form and how it actually works. So what you see here on my screen is basically my editing interface for the form. This is where I add my questions. This is where I change the possible answers. This is where I literally design my form from scratch. Now, this is one component of the forms. The second component is the live version of the form. So this is what I've sent you, or this is where you would have landed if you followed the link in the YouTube chat or on the screen. So basically, this is where you can actually go and fill in the form. This is what my students would see, or this is what the parents would see if I would send them the link. And then all of the responses, as you see, are automatically collected in the forms interface, which is a really neat way of actually having an overview of the data. So this gives me a really good insight on, first of all, who's in the room. So this is the first example of using forms, right? I could use them as a check-in activity, because we were talking earlier also at the beginning, okay, how do we create check-in activities for the students? How do we know that they are there now when kids are not physically in school, right? You could easily create a Google form, check-in activity, record their names and some other things, ask them some things about their day and so on and so forth. What you'll see is, once again, that the results are updated in real time. I also see a quick overview of the data. So as that there are some people that are newer to Google Forms or not so confident in their skills as well in the audience, which gives me a lot of useful insights as a trainer or as a teacher during the school day. Also, talking about well-being, that's why I've included actually this question. I've changed my form after the intro session when we were talking a bit about well-being. This is also one way of getting some input from the students, not only in terms of their skills and how confident they are in using a tool or checking their understanding or whatnot, but I can also get some input regarding their state. How are they feeling, right? And then if I see that somebody is badgerlicious, I might want to go and talk to them and say, hey, tell me how to do that. I want that as well. Or if somebody's scared, I can go and approach them and say, hey, what's happening? Are you scared because you don't understand what's happening? Are you scared because something's happening in real life outside school? And then I can get in touch with the school counselor and ask for support and so on and so forth. So these are just some simple examples. Now, the third component, I would say, you can add also on this whole idea is working with the data you collect. So by default, the data is collected in the Google Forms directly, as you see, but you can also create a spreadsheet where you actually save the data. And then you can go into the whole spreadsheet data processing part where you can color code and create graphs and filter and so on and so forth. So this is something that you have to be aware. It's not something that you have to stick to Google Forms when you analyze your data. You can also connect Google Forms with Google Spreadsheets. Now, having said that, let's go back to the forms and let's see how, as I said, how we would create a simple form. And as I said, I'll just go through some basic examples and I'll show you how I would use different types of questions and for what purpose. And then we will change that form into a quiz. And we'll look also at some tips for actually helping you use the quiz feature for Google Forms. So I will start actually from scratch. By the way, in case you didn't know that, this is a useful tip. When you want to create a new document or spreadsheet or slide or form, you can just type in your Chrome Omnibox forms.new or docs.new or anything like that. So let's assume I want to create a simple evaluation, or I will just go and add different types of questions, and we'll talk about each question where I would use it. Now, depending on what I want to use the form for, I would add different questions. One thing I would say for sure is that when I use my form with my students, in most cases, I would want to collect their names. And this is something that, as you've noticed, Google Forms is trying to help me, and automatically it is changing the type of question to short answer. So it's using artificial intelligence and language analysis and machine learning. It's trying to help you out. In some cases, it's doing a good job. Definitely double check the suggestions though. So once again, if I want to use the form with a student or for a quiz, I would definitely ask for their name. Once again, if I want to use an anonymous feedback form, then definitely I will not include this question. The second question I would generally include in a form that I'm using with my students, or in some cases even with parents, let's say, or with my colleagues, is the email. Why? Because I would want to know who filled in the form, and I would like to have an easy way to actually stay in touch with them and email them back directly from the spreadsheet or from the forms interface and so on and so forth. And this is especially important if you use the self-graded quizzes and you want to release the grades later, for example, after manual review, you will definitely need to collect the email addresses. Now, talking about the idea of collecting email and actually Google Forms helping you out. You see that it also gives you a suggestion to enable email collection setting. You can enable that, and then by default, it will collect the email automatically. Now, keep in mind, this works only in your domain. So if you want to use it with parents outside of the school who do not have a Google account on the school domain, this will not work. So then it's better to include an email question. I see some questions in the chat as well. So yes, you can use forms also for choose your own ending, and actually I will show you that in the second part of the training. And yes, you can use happy or sad faces for little ones, and I'll show you that also in the second part of the training. So these are, as I said, this is the starting point, just getting the form set up and getting into some tips. As you see, you build the form step by step, and you can add as many questions as you want. You can also add other elements. So you could, if you, for example, you've created the form already, you don't have to type the questions from scratch. You could import them from a different form. You can also add different parts of your form where you have a title, description, or you can add images or videos, for example, right? So let's say I want to add a video, and this video will be a YouTube video. So the default option is to have a YouTube video, and I've intentionally used this video from the Apps Events channel, in which Seti shows you different ways to actually record your screen. Because this is one way in which you could use forms also with your students, right? So for the flipped classroom approach, you can record your videos, put them online, and then ask students some questions based on those videos, right? So I can embed the video directly in Google Form, and then I can add a question and ask you, have you subscribed to the Apps Events YouTube channel already? And once again, you see that Google Forms is actually trying to be helpful. Yes, no, and I will add those two options. I'll make this question required, and here we can start building our forms and adding more questions. So once again, I would say then the next question would be, what is your favorite screencasting tool, for example, right? And this would be an open-ended question. I would like to collect text, and I would ask your opinion about it as well. And then let's add some questions which could be used also as a quiz, right? And then we'll go to changing this form into a quiz. So I will also add another question, and talking about screen recorders and talking about the different channels online and finding resources online. You can also use questions related to the content of the video, right? So if you want to keep students engaged and you want to make sure that they actually watch the video, you can ask them some questions based on something that was being said in the video or something that was presented in the video. Ask them for a keyword or something like that, right? And you could also use that as a self-graded quiz, of course. So once again, another example: what is the best browser to be used with the Google Suite? And we'll have a multiple choice question. Right now, I'm just making the questions as we go, of course. So I'll have Chrome, I'll have Firefox, I'll have Edge, I'll have Safari, and we'll stop here because I just want to give you an example of how we could use this for a quiz, right? So here we go. This is how we build a form. This is how we add the questions. And this is where I'll start also giving you some tips in terms of how I would design my form. So I would basically try to keep students. I would try to prevent students from, let's say, getting divine inspiration from their colleagues, right? Especially when they're in the same classroom and they have their devices right next to each other. One option would be, for example, and that's my personal choice, to use, rather than use multiple choice questions, I would use the drop-down type of questions. It's the same outcome, so they will only be able to choose one of the answers. But just to exemplify and show you what the visual difference is, this is how the form would look like with, for example, a drop-down question and with a normal multiple choice question. So here, for example, if I have the same order of answers and I choose the first answer, it's quite easy for somebody sitting close to me to see that I chose the first option. Whereas where I have the drop-down menu, it might be a bit more difficult to read what option I chose. So that's one thing that that's good to keep in mind. The second thing is, of course, I have some options in the question settings, basically, to actually choose. I can choose to shuffle the option order. So if I choose this for this particular question, every student that accesses the form basically will get a different order of the answers. So that's quite helpful as well. So that's something that that you can think about as well. Now, quickly, just to go through some other types of questions, checkboxes. This is the type of question where you can have more than one correct answer. File upload is a useful question when you want to collect files from your students. This is something that many teachers are struggling nowadays. I've seen many teachers complaining about this online. They say that they're overwhelmed with emails because students email them files and photos rather than using Classroom or whatnot. So this is where you can actually create a Google form, create a file upload question, and then they can send you the files through a Google form. And that could be one single form which you use to collect all the files from your students, right? So this is how this is how the question would look like. And basically, you would say just, I would change the question, of course, upload your files here. And then, of course, if you want to get more granular, you can choose what type of files they can upload and so on and so forth. So this is one thing to keep in mind. And also, as I said, the other types of questions, the next sort of group of questions, these are the ones that you would use more for market research and opinions and surveys. Like on a scale of 1 to 6, how happy are you with the class, and so on and so forth. Or for the multiple choice grid, for example, how often are you using the following devices? You would have computer, laptop, phone, whatnot, and you have daily, weekly, monthly, and so on and so forth. But there's also creative ways of using this in the classroom. So I could create, for example, a multiple choice grid where I have several chemical elements as a science teacher, and I would ask the students to place them in the correct period or in the correct group in the periodic table. And then I would use a multiple choice grid. And then, of course, the last two types of questions, date and time. This is something that that's literally used for arranging different events. I'm happy to read that, Aaron, that this solves the problem with the file uploads. I'll show you also how I would use it in action in the second part as well in an example. Now, at this stage, once again, this is just a form. So this is just collecting data. When I want to change a form into a quiz, I'll quickly show you that. And then we'll go through some questions before we move to the next bit. You would change a form into a quiz from the settings menu. So usually, as usual, when you see the cogwheel icon or the gear icon, that's the sign for the settings menu. And this is where you can play a bit with the settings, right? So you can automatically collect email addresses. You can restrict forms in your domain, which is really important, especially if you have anything related to student data and so on and so forth. You can also limit it to one response. And this is particularly important for quizzes, especially if you want to have formative or summative assessments and so on and so forth. You can allow people to edit the responses after they submit or see the summary charts and text responses. This is where you decide on an individual basis which works best for you. Under the presentation, I just want to show you this part and have you focus on this part. Shuffle question order. This can also help when you're working with quizzes in the classroom, because this will shuffle also the question order in the form, not only the answers for the individual multiple choice questions. So this can be quite helpful as well. Yeah, exactly. Very good point, Laura. So if you do shuffle the question order, what I would recommend is to split your form in 2 different sections. And in the first section, you would have the name and the email, for example, or just the name. And you put all of the questions, the quiz questions, in the second part of the form, in the second section. And what this does is that basically the questions will be shuffled only within that section. It will not be mixed with the other sections. So that's also something to keep in mind. And then this is where we get to the quizzes part. So we can change the form into a quiz with one button. By the way, if you use Chromebooks, you can also use the locked mode for Chromebooks. This is great because in the locked mode, students cannot do anything else other than work on the form. They will have the form in front of them, and that's it. They cannot actually open other tabs, work on or search for things, and so on and so forth. But once again, this works only on Chromebooks. Then the next part is when do you release the grade? Immediately after each submission, or in some cases, you might want to release them later after manual review. When would you do that? When, for example, you plan to use the same quiz with more groups of kids, and you don't want the first group to see the results and then tell the others the answers. That's one scenario. Another scenario would be that some questions you might want, for example, a paragraph type of question where you have more text from the student, and that cannot be automatically graded. So then you will have to manually grade it and give the feedback, and then you would send the feedback back to the students. So this is it. This is how I change the form into a quiz, but I have to go through one more step. So now that I've changed the form into a quiz, I need to show Google Forms which are the correct answers and how many points do I want to assign to each question. So you'll notice that once that I've changed the form into a quiz, I have this extra button for every question. So now I have to go to the questions I want to grade. So I'll click on the answer key. I can choose how many points I want to assign for that question. I'll say 10 points for this question, and I need to choose the correct answer, right? Which is obviously for this question, it should be yes. If it's no, then you're wrong, and you have to go there and subscribe. Of course, I'm using now this as an example. This is not a question I would grade normally, but I'm just using this question as an example. Then I can also add individual feedback, not individual feedback, but different feedback for the correct or for the wrong answer. And I can say for the incorrect answer, I would just say, hey, why didn't you subscribe? I can put the link, right? And I can put the link in there in Google Forms, and I will just say, subscribe now. Or, of course, I could include a link to some useful resources for my students, like a review document or something like that. But the main thing is to keep in mind that you can actually add links or directly YouTube videos there from here. Or if it's correct, you can just say, awesome, make sure to check more videos, right? So this is, once again, I'm using an example now on the spot, but this is where you can give different type of feedback. Those students that get the correct answer, you can give them extension materials. Those that didn't get the correct answer, you can give them revision materials, or you can guide them through different other tools and resources. So that's the way to actually grade the questions. If you have a self-grading quiz, you can automatically grade multiple choice questions, checkbox questions, drop-down, and short answer questions as well. So just to give you an example, this is another example of a question that I would definitely not grade, but I'm using this just as an example now. So I could just say, hey, Loom, right? Or I could change the question, and I could also have more than one correct answer. And then depending on what students would write in the answer box, I could actually accept more of them as a correct answer. And this is where also it would be a good choice for me to manually grade this question rather than using auto-grade. And of course, I would need to decide what questions I'm actually automatically grading and which ones I am not. And that's it. I've turned my form into a quiz. Of course, I'll give it a title, so demo quiz. And now I can send the form to my students, either via email directly from the forms interface, or I can copy the link and then send the link to my students via email, or I can tweet it, I can put it on Facebook, I can send it in Hangouts, wherever I want. Or the last part, and I'll wrap because I know that we are getting close to the end of the session, I could also attach the form to a classroom assignment. And the good part about it is that when you actually create the assignment in Classroom, you can actually import the grades automatically. So you'll see that I can actually add the form directly from my Google Drive. This is the one I've just created, and voila, I can assign this to my students. When they fill in the form, their answers will, or the grades will automatically, I can choose to automatically import the grades in Google Classroom as well. So as I said, I'll stop here with the intro part. This was just a brief overview of how I would build a form, how I would get going, and some of the questions that I would use and in what scenario. There's many other ways in which you could use these questions, of course.
Yeah, no, Bogdan, that was amazing run through, and it's really caught people's attention. Really pleased to see we're still sort of over 70 viewers. So obviously there's still an interest in what's going on, which is great. So I think you picked up most of the questions. We had a question come in about, can you do a matching kind of activity? And Jenny Lou came back with a yes. So the question was, let me just switch over to this one. There's also a lot of interest about how I did the ticker tape along the bottom. And it is StreamYard indeed. Yeah, so mainly there was questions around, can you time limit the form? Yeah. So I presume that's the kind of thing you're probably going into over the next 30 minutes is some of the add-ons that are available.
So what I would say is that there are different ways in which you could do that. You could also literally post a timer on your screen. And when the timer hits 0, so if I would do this in the classroom, I would just say, hey, this is a timer on the screen. When the timer hits 0, I go and I switch the form from accepting responses to not accepting responses any longer. So this is the hardcore version, when you literally cut access and people cannot fill in the form anymore. There are various other add-ons that can limit how many people can fill in a form, or how many people can choose, for example, a certain time slot for a meeting. So there are different options here. But just to show you, because I have my screen back, what I meant by literally manually stopping the responses or manually disabling the option to accept responses, you do it from here. So this is one option. And once again, this is the one that you can do in Google Forms directly. It's manual, but it works. If you want, you have different add-ons like form limiter or different other add-ons that can help with that as well.
So there was also, I'm loving this, just to make sure I don't only give you the questions. So a lot of interest in that there. And I'm just trying to here's the question. Can we do match the following in Google Forms? So you showed a checkbox question where you could select more than one. For anyone that's done the certified educator level 1 or 2, maybe, I don't know if they were referring to the drag and drop option.
I think so, yeah.
Which is not quite so easy to replicate.
Yeah, so that's not so easy to replicate in Google Forms. What you can do, though, is to use Google Drawings, for example. And you create the different elements and text boxes. You have some of them fixed as a background in Google Drawings, and the other ones, they are elements that you can move around, and you ask the students to move them around and, of course, to match them. So that's one option. The second option, which is a bit convoluted, if you really want to use forms, you could create an image with the options and then create a multiple choice grid and put the options and have them choose what they want to match them with. But as I said, it's a bit convoluted, and that definitely doesn't work for smaller kids because it's a bit too complicated.
So I think there's a few questions like about add-ons you might suggest. So I think we're probably sort of moving into the next section with these questions. But there's a question about, have you used form limiter? I mean, I have for both time limited, so a form will stop accepting for responses at a particular time. I've also used it where the first 10 people to sign up will be able to fill in the form, and then it will stop accepting after that. So I've used form limiter myself. Is that something you had chalked in for the next 30 minutes?
I will mention some add-ons. So form limiter was not one that I would go in depth, but I can actually quickly show how it works. The main idea with the add-ons is, and that's why I started on my answer with the manual way of doing it and using just Google Forms, because I am aware that in many schools, you have to go through a certain process to get the add-ons approved or installed. And this is the case also, especially in the US, in many schools, it's controlled at the district level. So that's why I went with the manual, quick and easy solution first. And then, of course, if you can add the add-ons, that's great. You can use different add-ons as well. Keep in mind the add-ons, most of them are third-party applications or tools. Check the privacy statements and everything else before you install any random add-on out there. So keep that in mind.
There's one other question here from Martha, which was, can we add on voice notes for speaking tests? And can students answer in voice too? I can't think of a straightforward way of doing that. There's like, you can link it to a voice, to an audio file in Drive, but then have them go back.
Yeah, so I've actually done that with a voice note or a recording, not a voice note, but actually a recording. So I've created the recording, I saved it in Drive, I've shared it with the link, and then in Google Forms, I would just literally insert, for example, a text section, and I would just say, please listen to the recording, and then I would put the link here. So insert link here. And then after this, I would ask them the questions for whatever I want them to answer based on that recording. Or if I want them to actually record something and then submit the file, of course, I would give them instructions, show them how to do that. And I would ask a file upload question, please send me a recording. That's one option. Or the second option would be, I can also, rather than having this question, I could have a simple short answer question, and I could tell them, please upload your file to Google Drive, share it with the link, and give me the link here. And then I can access your file. So that's another option. That's how I've done it in the past, basically.
Yeah, and I think Darren is also suggesting a very similar option, which is using the file upload question option as well to enable them to upload their audio files too.
Yeah.
And there are lots of sort of really easy voice recorder extensions for those audio files that you want to easily record.
Yeah, you also have, by the way, Google Keep, which you can run on your phone, and you can record a voice note in Google Keep and move from there. It's integrated with the Google Suite, so it's really easy to use as well.
Cool. And Jenny was asking, what's the file size limit for uploading in Forms? If you're able to just change to a file upload question, pretty extensive size of files you can go for if you want to. So is 10 gig the largest?
Yeah. So this is the largest, but once again, of course, I would not recommend uploading 10 gigabyte files with Google Forms.
I mean, I think while storage isn't unlimited in Google Drive, I'm aware there is a limit for an individual file of 5 terabytes.
Yeah, that's one thing. The other thing is also, please be mindful. We should be mindful as teachers also on the conditions that our kids have at home. And they will not always have a fast connection to the internet. And that's the case for me, for example, because I live in the center of Prague and my upload speed is really bad. So when I need to upload something, it takes ages. So if I would be asked to upload a large file by my teacher, I could easily spend 3 hours in front of my laptop waiting for the file to be uploaded. So keep that in mind. Try to stick to smaller sizes when you want to upload the files.
There's one more thing I'll highlight before you jump into the next section and spice up your forms, which was just some questions from Creativity Infinity around some of the limitations of the quiz. I don't know if you showed it, I may have not spotted it. In the responses, when you've got a quiz, you can go through and manually override the automatic grading. I think that probably sort of solves a lot of those issues, that you can go in and give scores where you feel that credit is deserved. There's still the teacher autonomy.
Yeah, so for example, just to give an example, what is the capital city of Czechia, right? And of course, some students might say Prague, and I'll have it a short answer. But some students might write Prague with a lowercase, right? And then if I don't put in this answer as a correct answer, and then some of my students do write Prague with a lowercase, and then they come back to me and complain, I can also manually go back and update the grades and say, yeah, okay, I can accept this answer. So keep in mind, because it's an automated process, you do have some limitations, and it depends on how you phrase your questions and what types of answers you expect. But if you want to have a better control of the feedback you give and you want to accept more possible answers, you can also look into the Flubaroo add-on, which is actually an add-on for Google Sheets, which gives you a bit more flexibility in terms of working through the self-graded quizzes when it comes to the answers. It's a bit more complex to set up than the Google Forms by default. But if you want that advanced, let's say, feedback capability, then definitely have a look at that.
Awesome and tremendous. Right. So I will let you move on to the next section, where you're sort of obviously a bit shorter on time now. So I will get out your way and let you push on. So back over to you as you go a little bit deeper into Google Forms with some top tips. Over to you, Bogdan.
I'll move faster through them because the main idea was just to get people inspired and give them some ideas of or some examples of how I've actually used them, right? And by the way, good tip, when you're done with something, you can actually just close all the tabs because we are trying to keep things organized and have a clutter-free browser. So I just want to touch upon some creative ways of using Google Forms. As I said, in most cases, we use them for just creating data collection forms and whatnot, or creating quizzes, but we can use them for other things. And also, I want to answer a question I had earlier. Could you include images in Google Forms? And that's actually something that I want to show you now, how easy it is to include images and how easily you can get creative with images in Google Forms. So I'll start actually from scratch. And you can use images just like you would use videos, as I said. So when you have the questions, you can insert an image and then add some questions based on that. But you could also include images as the possible answers, right? So I could just say, how are you feeling today? Or how do you feel about the lesson, or anything like that. And of course, I could add some options as a multiple choice option. But keep in mind, especially for smaller kids, they are more visual, and having forms in a visual format can be very helpful. So then, rather than typing an answer, I would go to add an image. And this is where I can actually search for images, or I can use any of the images I have around. So I will just say happy, and to bring some images that are good, I would just say happy emoji. I choose the image, I insert it, and voila, I have the first visual option. And it helps also to type in what the image represents. And then I will just say another option, and I would search for the image. And I would just say, well, I'm feeling meh. Let's see if, no, I need meh emoji. Okay, and I can use one of the images that pop up. And voila, this is how easy it is to actually add visual options for the images. Now, what's good to know also if you use images is, first of all, the text will always be displayed under the image you choose, and they will be resized so they occupy the same amount of space. So it doesn't matter how large the image is, they will always be sort of occupying the same amount of space on the screen in the view, in the live version of the form. Now, something else that I wanted to mention here, and this is something that works really well with smaller kids as well, is using Bitmojis. I don't know if you're aware of Bitmoji or if you've used Bitmojis, but this is something that allows you to create your own avatar. This was the craze a few years ago when Snapchat was launched and whatnot. You can install the Chrome extension. Kids love it, especially smaller kids. They really love the Bitmojis. You can literally just insert any of the Bitmojis here as well. So just to show you how this would work. And by the way, as I said, I'm not going in all the details. I'm just giving you some ideas of how you would actually use this. I would go to insert an image, add an image, and then I would go to by URL. So I would insert the image by using a link. And then I go to my Bitmoji and I search for whatever I want to insert. So I will just say sad or whatever, right? And I will just right-click on the Bitmoji, copy image address, and go to my forms and paste it here. And this brings the Bitmoji into my form. So once again, especially for those smaller kids that are in kindergarten or elementary school, this is a great way of helping them relate to whatever you have in the form. And also, I'm trying to bring in some resources that can be useful across the board. So not only for middle school and upper school teachers, but also for the smaller kids. And talking about Bitmojis, by the way, Bitmoji belongs to Snapchat, so they bought it a while ago. They also have the Snapchat camera, which, by the way, works with Google Meet as well. So if you want to have a green background, or you want to change your background or play with the Snapchat filters, you can use that in Google Meet as well. That's more than what we can cover now, but I just wanted you to make you aware of that. Oh, yeah, now I see that Darren just mentioned it also in the chat. So this is the first part related to using images in forms. Please be aware of that. Now, I've also included on the slides, by the way, you have the links and you'll get them after the live session. I've also included Equatio on the same slide with images. Why? Because Equatio, it was mentioned earlier, it's basically an awesome, brilliant tool for STEM teachers, for math teachers, science teachers, and anything basically where you need to have equations and functions and graphs and anything like that. So Equatio is an extension for Google Chrome, and it works in all of the Google apps. Here, of course, I will show you how this works in Google Forms. And as you see in my Google Forms, I have this Equatio button. Once I have the extension installed, I can easily insert, for example, math. And that's why I've placed Equatio under the working with images, because what Equatio does, I'll quickly show you, is it opens the menu. I can easily either voice type or draw or just come up with an equation, right? So I would just say 1/2 x, and I can literally type, and it comes up with suggestions, plus 3. And when I'm done and I choose insert math, what it does is it creates an image, which it then inserts into the Google form, and my students can actually choose this as a possible answer. And here, of course, you can have quite a lot of different expressions and different options, like you can have integrals or square roots, cube roots, whatever. You can actually play around with all of the mathematical expressions, right, from 1 to n, or I'm just literally writing some random examples. But the main idea is, you see how easy it is to actually create the equations. It's quite suggestive, and you can once again create your possible answers. Now, keep in mind, if you want to do that.
May I just jump in on Equatio? As a maths teacher, the voice typing option in Equatio is really, really effective for building that mathematical language with younger learners as well. So if anyone was slightly put off by an integral, getting the children to speak the maths in using the voice operated version is a really nice way for sort of building that language. Why didn't it give the sign I expected? And they can go back and review that. So getting your students to speak in from distance might be a really nice way of checking that they're still building that maths understanding. So I couldn't help jump in on a maths one.
Well, thank you for the input. And I'll actually just quickly show how well it actually works. Integral from 1 to n of function of x equal to plus y. So this is where you actually, let me stop it, sorry. This is where you actually have to get used to actually change what you're trying to input, and you have to speak the language. And as you said, Ben, it's great also for students to practice how this would work, right? And this was just a random example just to show you that it actually picks up the voice typing, it picks up the voice or the speech, and it turns it into expressions. Of course, you have to practice, and that's something that can help students, as you said, get into that place where they can formulate even the expressions much better. It's the same with, for example, using your phone and taking some examples, taking some photos, right? Examples of chemical equations. Now, keep in mind the chemical equations. This is a newer feature, so I would just say sodium or whatever. I can search for I can search through the formulas, right? Sodium carbonate. And as you'll see, it works more with different components rather than getting the whole formula together. So I could have the ions, for example, and for the sodium, I would just choose the sodium ions, and so on and so forth. Now, as I said, keep in mind, Equatio was primarily designed for mathematics first, and then the chemistry part was added later, and they are still adding more features here as well. So sodium aluminate, what I was searching for earlier, for example, it will pop up here as well. So keep in mind, this is also something that you can play with. And of course, you can insert this also as an image. Now, I will insert the equation in my form. And as I said, just to preview the form, this is how the form would look like for my students. I can choose from the different options, and they can submit the form. Now, just something to clarify, Equatio is free for teachers. So what you've seen me doing here, inserting the different answers. And by the way, you can also insert functions and graphs in the question. So you could just, for example, use a graph editor. Some of you might know Desmos, but I could just say sign of I just have a different graph, right? And I could insert different options for the graph and plot them, and insert this also into my chart, into my form. Sorry. So I have the sign of x function. I can play with it, add it into my question, and ask some questions related to that particular graph, for example, for my students. Now, as I said, what you've seen me do here, I can easily do that. And as you see here, I've inserted the graph in the actual question body and not as an answer or as an answer option. So you can do that with the free Equatio account you can get as a teacher. For students, if you want students to be able to create the forms and insert all of these equations, for that you would need a paid account for the students. But having said that, as I said, having the free account for teachers can be of great help. And we went a bit overboard with the discussions earlier, and also with the examples of Equatio. But keep in mind, as I said, Equatio was free for teachers even before the COVID crisis. I think they are offering it for free for teachers since 2017, if I'm not mistaken. So that's something that you can be sure will not go away. So definitely have a look at it. And in the slides, you have also the link where you can actually get the license. Now, the other thing that I want to mention is also keep in mind that you can also have your phone. You can use your phone and file upload if you want students to actually upload different assignments for you, and so on and so forth. And I'll quickly move to the next step because I really want to show you this in terms of how you can use the multiple choice questions to actually either assign differentiated tasks or creating personalized stories. And I'll quickly go to the examples. And then, as I said, it's something that it's more trying to inspire you rather than showing you how to do it step by step. So for example, when I would like to assign differentiated tasks, let's say I'm away from school and I'm not sure if my substitute teacher is a science teacher, and I want to make sure that everything is under control, I could do this. Or even now, using distance learning, I could create differentiated tasks, forms where different students will work on different things at the same time. So here, for example, I would use my email address, right? Because as I said, I am trying to keep track of who filled in the form, and I want to stay in touch with them. And then this is where the magic happens. They can choose what they want to work on. I gave you 2 examples. Let's start with the periodic table revision. Based on this, they are sent to a certain part of my form, a certain section of my form, where, for example, I'm giving them a video and then I'm asking them different questions based on the video, right? And this is the more of the classical use for forms. But if I would go back, I want to show you the other example which I created, which is the vocabulary part. So here, the students that choose vocabulary, rather than giving them a form and a quiz, and asking them questions, I can give them instructions literally in my Google form. And I can tell them, hey, read this text. Then I would say, pay attention and identify the words you do not understand or you're not sure about. In the next question, I will say, okay, how many words did you identify in the text that you didn't know before or you're struggling or understanding? You write the answer, then I'm giving you the next task. Okay, now that we've gone through that, create a visual dictionary, create a copy of the document here, and make a copy. So I've set up the link for you already. And then you can go and create a dictionary for those words. When you're done with this, you go back to the form and you say, okay, once you're done, please upload your file. And this is where you send me your file and you send it to your teacher. So this is, once again, something that it's really easy to do. And this is where I would upload and send the file to my teacher as well. So this is, as I said, one way to actually working on assigning differentiated tasks or using gamification systems where rather than having different activities, you would have different points here. And on the same note, you can also create personalized stories. And it's the same function And this is more suitable for smaller kids, but you can, of course, use it for middle school and upper school as well. And there you go, like, hey, you wake up in a strange yet charming land with a treasure map and so on and so forth. And then you choose what happens next. And based on your choice, you're taken to a different part of the form, and then you get more details, and then you go and choose your next step, and so on and so forth. Now, I could use this just to tell a story for the small kids, but keep in mind, I could also add the learning component to it. So for example, here, when I say stop and make a fire, I could also include a question in the form and say, okay, when you stop and make a fire, my question for you is, hey, what do you need to be able to create a fire, right? So I will not only allow them to choose the next step of the story, but I can add that assessment component in one way or the other. So I can just include a question in the fire section and say, what materials do you need to create a fire, for example. And this is where I add also the idea of adding the assessment into the form. Now, keep in mind, this is an example where I've used more like Bitmojis for smaller kids, but you can very well use this for even high school kids, where you say, okay, what metal would you use for a certain activity, right, or for a certain purpose? And then based on the metal they choose, you take them to different parts of the form where you ask them, okay, tell me why you chose this metal, show me how it's used, tell me some information about that metal, and so on and so forth. So all of this is done with a simple multiple choice question where you choose the go-to section based on answer option. And this is why this is so powerful. You can adapt it to so many different situations, and you can do so many different things with it. I showed you just some examples. So what you do is you split your form into different sections, and then you choose which section you want to send the kids or the people who fill in the form once they choose a certain option in the answer key. So once again, this is one other way of using it. And I am running out of time, and I would not want to steal from John's time, but I just want to make you aware of other things you can do in Google Forms. You can use different add-ons for mail merging, for example, where you can turn the responses you receive in a Google form into documents and automatically email them to the students, or even just creating, let's say, attendance certificates or participation certificates or anything like that. So how would you use the add-ons? You will find them in the Forms interface under the More menu, and this is where you'll find the add-ons. I've mentioned some of them in the slide, which you'll get later, but as I said, please be aware of this option as well. And I'll stop talking now because, as I said, I'm going over time and I don't want to do that. But please feel free to reach out also after the session. You have the email, you have my Twitter account. Subscribe to the YouTube channel for Apps Events. You'll find lots of different useful tips there as well. And do follow Apps Events on Twitter as well, because that's where we share a lot of the tools and ideas we have as well in our toolbox, so to say. And quickly, to answer the last question, can you download the whole form as it looks online? You could take a screenshot, but why would you download a form? So that's something that you would use it mainly online. And if you want to print it, so just to quickly show you, you could print it. So you can save it as a PDF and print it if you want, but forms are mainly designed to be used online.
Awesome stuff. There's also a question. You mentioned a mail merge very briefly, and I think Amy would. The capitalization tells me she'd love to see a bit more of that. If you're happy to give us a couple of minutes just to show how that might be done.
I can quickly show you this. Sorry, John, for going over time. So I've actually. But this is really brief and really quick. So one example would be Form Publisher, where I can use, for example, a form where I collect the email and the name, and I can have a evaluation form at the end of my training session, for example. And also I can ask for the feedback. But once I have the Form Publisher as an add-on, what I can do next is I can take the data from, and this is where, let's hope it works. Let me reload. So I can take the data from the actual form publisher, from the actual form, and I can start the add-on. And it will tell me, hey, we've identified these questions. These are the data points we could actually pull from your answers. And you can either create your own template, or in this case, I'll use one of the pre-formatted templates. This is what it will do. It will generate the document for me. It will look, as I said, through the questions I have in my form. And this is where I'll have the markers. So this is what I choose what I want to include in the final document, right? So I'll just leave them like that for now, just to speed up the process for a bit. Then I go to the next step. Normally, I would choose what I want to actually include in the final document. This is where I can choose how I want to name the generated files, and I choose what I want to happen with those files. So I could have a copy of the document in my drive, or I can change the destination folder. I can change the template name, and so on and so forth. And as I said, I'm moving really fast now through this just to give you an idea of how this works. And this is where I choose how I want to, or what I want to do with the documents, right? So in this case, I can send them as PDF, or I can create Google Docs which they can edit, or I can just have it sent as a Word document, and so on and so forth. So this is where I'm actually done setting up my my form publisher. And now when somebody fills in the form, what should normally happen is that they would get an email with the document attached to it once they fill in that form. So quickly, I will fill in the form. Now, keep in mind, sometimes it's not happening instantly, but let's try it. Let's give it a go. And of course, I would normally use more time to actually design my template, and I wouldn't use just the standard template that comes from publisher, but I would actually design a nice attendance certificate or something like that, and I would send that one. So once again, once this is happening, it goes through the process. It's automating. It's creating the certificate, and it will be sending it to the email address I've used. And as I said, it's not happening on the spot, so I'm checking my email now to see if I get it, but I wouldn't want to steal too much time from John's session. But here we go. I have the email that I've received, and this is how the document looks like. So you started personalized it with my name, my email, this was my answer, and so on and so forth. So keep in mind, this is the template I've used. I can personalize this in any way I want. So I don't have to stick to the standard template. I can change it in any way I want. I can choose to email these files. I can choose to keep them on Drive. I can choose to play with them in different ways. And there are different mail merging add-ons. Form Publisher is one of them. There's also Formule and Autocrat, which work more with Google Sheets. So you start from Google Sheets, but they do a very similar thing. Does that cover really, really quickly how mail merging works and what it does?
I think you have happy customers, not the right word, but yeah. Amy, I think, has got a little bit to play around with. We also seem to have some very loyal educators working into the middle of the morning in the Philippines. And yeah, people were sort of threatening. We started off with a theme of educator and student well-being. So Aaron, I must encourage you to take advantage of some sleep for your own mental health, obviously, but I appreciate the sentiment. Really glad everyone's got some takeaways that they can use, hopefully sort of over the next few days and weeks in this situation. So yeah, Bogdan, thank you so much for sharing. Hopefully everyone has managed to get the chance to follow you and sort of pick up any questions they've got. We really appreciate your time and effort. It's always a pleasure to be working with you. And yeah, Forms is where it started as well. So that's a delight.
Thank you so much. Sorry, John, once again, and good luck.